All right, good evening. I'm Eric Weddle, education reporter at WFYI Public Media, and we're so glad that you are here with us this evening. Welcome to another in our occasional series of conversations about education at Central Library. With the help of the library, WFYI launched this series more than 5 years ago, and we have had almost 40 conversations here. Our goal was to shed light on educational concerns and education policies, hear from experts, and engage in a respectful conversation. Our thanks to our partners this evening, Chalkbeat Indiana, the Indianapolis Library, and the Recorder. Tonight, we're going to explore the referenda requested by the Indianapolis Public School District that is on the November ballot. And this referenda is more than a tax increase. It probably will set the stage for the future of the IPS district. We asked guests to join us, and each is an expert on this issue in their particular field, and I will introduce them in a moment. So this evening, we'll hear a short presentation on the referenda, and then I will ask questions of the guests here. You can also ask questions. If you can get a postcard here tonight, you can fill out a question, raise your hand, we'll pick it up for you, and we will read that to members on the panel. If you are watching at home, you can use the hashtag IPS Tax Forum. That will be filtered to us as well, and we can ask those questions. We will take questions from you until 7:10 tonight. We are scheduled to end at 7:30 p.m. WFYI is live streaming this currently, and it will be archived on YouTube. And now I'd like to introduce our guests. Michael O'Connor is the IPS School Board President. Weston Young is the IPS Chief Financial Manager. Mark Fisher is with the Indy Chamber. Rosa Vasquez is an IPS teacher. She is at Arsenal Tech, an ESL teacher. And Larry DeBoer is a Purdue University professor who specializes in taxes and property taxes. And so we're going to kick this off right now with Weston Young, who is going to provide a short presentation on the request from IPS for a tax referendum. Weston.
Great. Thank you, Eric. On the screen, we have a presentation which you can check out on the website. That's voteyesforips.com. This is our campaign to raise money for the IPS school system over the next 8 years. Just to give you an overview of what the district is like, who we are, we're 88 unique schools and programs. We have over 2,000 teachers and certified employees. We have about 4,400 total staff. We have just around 32,000 each year to educate within our buildings. And then also, the highlight is that the last 3 years or so, that the number on the screen, 31,820, is the highest that we've had in those 3 years. Another data point, just to understand the large scale at which we operate, is that we're traveling more than 20,000 miles each school day. We're a majority minority district. On the screen, you can see the makeup of our student population, a very diverse population. We also have a high English as a second language population at 16%. The statewide average has averaged within 4 to 5%. When it comes to special education, students with special needs, we have a 19% population. Statewide is in the mid-teens. So the November 2018 referenda is going to have 2 questions on the ballot, an operating referenda and a capital referenda. There will be a need to vote yes twice. Why the referenda? We are hoping to continue the great work that we've been working on with the community since 2015, when the strategic plan of the community that was informed by the community, the business community, and the student population, the parent population at large. Myself as a parent, as a resident, as a volunteer finance person at the time, had a chance to engage with that. And that was 2014-15 in development, informed by a lot of input from the community, 1 being the Indy Chamber, 2 being the Council of Great City Schools, and the community at large. We want to continue that. We want to continue having safe schools and a high quality education for students. We want to also ensure that we continue the path forward for the compensation that we've been able to deliver the last 3 or 4 years. On the operating referendum, it'll be additional funds over 8 years. We hope to, again, focus on competitive wages and benefits to attract and retain quality individuals. Sorry about that.
Technical difficulties. Commercial.
There we go.
Oh.
All right.
Might want to go back a couple slides.
There's a lot of color on the previous slides.
Now you turned it off.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. There we go. All right. What do you think, Eric?
If you can go back without it stopping, yeah, I think people in the audience like to see some of these numbers
Great.
you mentioned.
Sorry about that.
Great,
Again,
thank
sorry.
you very much. Thanks.
So again, big splash. Vote yes for IPS. Our data, who we are. We're a majority minority district, our population of students. Our ESL program, 16% of our student population. SPED, 19% of our population. We're voting on 2 questions, an operating referendum and a capital referendum. Safe schools, high quality teachers, high quality staff, competitive wages among our central Indiana area. It's a referendum on the operating side for 8 years. For the capital, we're hoping to invest in the safety and security of our IPS-owned facilities. On the screen, there's some examples of the investments that would be made: exterior lighting, technology upgrades, modernizing the classroom locking mechanisms, most importantly, to keep students and staff safe. The breakdown of the capital referendum of the total $52 million, construction renovation taking about 20% of that at about $11 million, and the safety and security just over $40 million. Over the course of the last decade, IPS has experienced significant cuts in funding. On this screen, we highlight many of the total dollars and the average dollars we've had in cut losses since 2010. There's three main areas that IPS and schools in Indiana are funded. There's federal, state, and local. From the federal side, we've received less money. From the state side, we've received about 4% less this school year than we were receiving in 2010. At the same time, the state average has increased across the state. At the same time, inflation has increased roughly 2% in those 8 years. So that, I'll just stop right there. That is the biggest imbalance, and the best way to display it. 2010, $365 more than what we're receiving now, 5% less we're receiving more than 2010. Inflation during that entire time carries on. We have to cut that budget gap. On the property tax side, the local property taxes, we've had property tax caps that have lowered the dollar amounts that we would receive from local property tax payers. The last time IPS went to referendum was not for an operating referendum. It was for a capital referendum. And in the 2000s, there were 3 petitions, remonstrances, and referenda that went on. The last one was in 2008 to basically fund HVAC and air conditioning across the district. Again, since then, most districts in Marion County have either asked and passed or asked and failed for referendum. So 11 districts in Marion County, 8 districts have gone for referendum, 7 have passed. It's hard to compete for the wages and retain high quality teachers when everybody around you has increased their cash flow and you haven't. So during that time when there's been decreases and cuts, the last 3 years, since 2015, we've invested a little over $8.8 million annually to invest in our teachers for retention and attraction of quality teachers. The numbers for the tax referendum. On the operating side, we are asking for a max tax rate of 19.6 cents. So 19.6 cents is what we're asking for. That equates to about $220 million over the course of 8 years, roughly about $27.5 million annually in the projection. What we're also asking for is, on the capital side, $52 million. So the $52 million would come in as a bond, and we'd be paying that off through debt over the course of time. The tax rates are listed here on the screen. You can go to our website, myips.org/learn more, and have a tax calculator, enter the assessed value, the gross market value of your home or property, and see the calculation and the estimate of the tax impact to you as a taxpayer. The average taxpayer in IPS district is a $75,300 home. The monthly impact to that taxpayer would be a little over $3 per month. You can see through that table the different impacts depending on the value of the home. What we want to highlight here is some of the steps we've taken as a district, as the board, to show strong financial stewardship, to push more dollars to the classroom. Many of you are aware of many of the real estate transactions that we've engaged in the last 3 years. The total dollar amounts that we've had from sales of property is over $18 million. These are one-time inflows, reducing long-term costs as far as deferred maintenance, utilities, and maintenance. But most importantly is being able to sell these properties and put them back on the tax rolls so that we actually have benefit in the long run. The most prolific one is the Coca-Cola bottling company plant on Mass Ave, which is going to receive an investment of over $200 million from the developers and hopefully attract and retain residents and commercial business here in Indianapolis. We've also right-sized the central office. You can look at some of our documents we've had in board meetings October 2016, and for specifically, we had an analysis done where we showed we're running lean as a district compared to other urban districts nationally. We've also taken opportunities to refinance our debt when available. 2016, we refinanced about $17 million over the course of the rest of the bond. We're in the process of refinancing another set of bonds. We also have opportunities to lease properties when it makes sense. We're getting about $800,000, $700,000 a year on those properties. A lot of numbers, a lot of the rationale and why, but what have we been doing in the classroom? The last 10 years, we've been graduating more students. So 10 years ago, the graduation rate was 47% for IPS. This last year, 83%. Those students come for education. They also have needs at home in their community, and there's a lot of funding that goes towards feeding students and keeping them healthy and giving them just the basic nourishment that's needed. So over the course of each day, 14,000 breakfast meals are served. There's 22,000 daily lunches, and each month, over 800,000 meals served. In the summer, 54,000 meals served. And during the upcoming fall break, there'll be students showing up and receiving meals as well. Over the course of fall, winter, and spring breaks, 30,000 meals served. Another slide where we talk about keeping our financial house, where we've decreased our central office 32%. Other districts around us seeing a 14.5% increase. $18 million from our revenue sales of properties. $1.5 million saved from our refinances. And then what I'm interested in hearing from the panel is the impact of tax-exempt properties, of TIFs, on our assessed value that allows us to receive property tax bills. In Indianapolis Public Schools District, we are the state capital, we are the cultural capital, we are the entertainment capital, the sports capital, the university capital. You come and play, you work, and a lot of that time it's governed. There's tax-exempt properties in downtown Indianapolis, in the Indianapolis District, like no other place across the state. And that has an impact in our analysis with policy analytics, have done work, and we've pushed that to our website and had them present, that is something that has an impact. And then many of our neighborhoods have many abandoned homes, and those aren't adding much to the tax coming into the district as well. The total ask, $220 million on operating, plus 52 of capital, equaling $272 million over that 8-year period. 80% of that 52 we've seen would go towards safety and security. Much of that ask was reduced because of the work that we did with the Indy Chamber and the team that came in and documented projected savings. Those savings need to be realized to really see the increases in compensation and increases in the investment that were spoken about in that report. At the same time, these are projected savings, and we are working diligently even this week, starting that process with the MOU with the Indy Chamber that was agreed upon in September. Many people have talked about the facts of this $30 million deficit that existed back in the 13-14 time frame. So myself, I was a finance dad sitting at my CPA firm office, reading the same type of news that was coming out. And as I got involved as a volunteer on the Budget Development Committee and involved in the strategic plan, what resonated is that the cash balance, no matter how big the revenue and how big the expenditure, it was always coming back down to $50 to $60 million at the end of the year. And it really came down to communication throughout the year to the board. The board was not getting actual dollars and actual reports showing the financial picture. That was noted in the Indy Chamber analysis. It was noted in the Council of Great State Schools. Anybody looking at the cash balance over the course of the last 10 years, from 2013 to 2003, would have seen that $50 to $60 million was in the bank at the end of the year. So where was that $30 million deficit? Over the course of 2 independent audits, it was seen that the accounting approach and the budgetary communication was not correct. And in fact, that year, there was an $8 million surplus. So again, since that time, steadily decreasing revenues, inflation, and increases in pay for the first time in years are depleting that $8 million surplus from that year and having deficits each year since. So what if the referendum fails? Reducing services. We won't be able to compete for teachers. Layoffs. And I think just overall the morale, not just of the schools, but of the communities where those schools exist, the families, and also just the community at large. If the referendum passes, we'll be able to remain competitive. We'll be able to continue the path we've made and the progress we've made the last number of years on compensation. We'll be able to have safe and secure schools, make our best efforts in doing that. We'll continue to support our special needs program and also our choice programs. The last slide is about how you can get involved. We encourage each one of you to check out on social media, our Twitter handle, on Facebook, our website, and also check out many of the events that are coming out the next month to learn more about how you can get involved and support the referendums.
All right, Weston, thank you very much for the explanation of that. I hope everyone feels like they know what the district is asking for and the reasons behind that. So I'm going to just jump into some questions right now. And as I said before, if you have a question, you can write it out on a card, raise your hand, and we'll pick it up. And online, you can do it on Twitter or social media, hashtag IPS Tax Forum. Professor DeBoer, before I ask you, I guess, about some details of this plan or just in terms of the reasons why it's done, could you just provide a brief history of why I think there's been so far 160 plus referenda across the state by school districts asking taxpayers to pay more for capital projects or pay? Why are we here?
Well, asking a professor to be brief is a risk, but I'll try. Excuse me. Well, back in 1998, the Indiana Supreme Court tossed out our assessment system for the property tax, declared it unconstitutional, and that created 10 years of property tax policy chaos. And the chaos was finally settled, or at least culminated, in the 2008 property tax reform, which was probably the biggest property tax reform we'd had in the state, at least since 1973. What happened there? They removed schools, the school general fund, from the property tax. This was a way to cut property taxes across the state. They increased the sales tax from 6% to 7% in order to help fund the schools, replacing the property tax with state aid. They initiated the process of putting property tax caps in the state constitution, and these put caps on the total property tax bill that any taxpayer in Indiana could pay. And they created a referendum process for capital projects. Prior to this, we had a unique system of competing petition drives, essentially, for approving capital projects. And now, any big capital project must go to a referendum of the voters. November 2008 was the first election where capital project referenda were required. There were 5 of them. 4 of them passed. And one of them was the IPS capital project referendum. It passed with 72% of the vote, and it was a $278 million proposal, and that was and is still the largest that's ever been proposed and passed. However, in 2009, in the depths of the Great Recession, 15 capital projects were proposed across the state, and 2 passed. And this was, we contribute that, I guess, to the Great Recession. Although as an economist, I would point out interest rates were really low at that point, so it would have been a great time to borrow, but people didn't feel like that was the time, I guess, to increase spending. The strange thing that happened, though, yes, capital projects referenda were now required, but we also saw an increase in the operating referenda, or the tax referenda, as they're also called. Prior to 2008, these were legal, they were done, but you'd get one every couple of years, maybe. In 2009, we saw 6, and 4 of them passed. And since then, we've seen more than 100 of these things. So all of a sudden, we started seeing the tax referenda too. I'm not exactly sure why the change happened right then, but certainly taking the schools off the property tax, a nice stable revenue source, and putting it on the sales tax and the income taxes at a time when the state budget was in quite a bit of trouble from the Great Recession. That may have had something to do with it. The property tax caps subtracting revenue from property taxes that were still collected by schools, that may have had something to do with it as well. Or it may be that schools just began to get practice doing referenda and decided to do tax referenda as well. Since the requirement came along, and since the tax referenda increases or more frequently were used, since November 2008, in other words, there have been 176 referenda. And I got the percentages here if you care to hear. 63% have passed. 103 of those have been tax referenda. 67% of those have passed. 73 have been capital projects referenda, and 56% have passed. Here in Marion County, there have been 21 referenda. 17 have passed.
And are you able to talk a little bit about IPS's current referenda, kind of how it compares in the area or statewide?
Sure. Well, I looked at IPS's overall tax rate, and it's about $1.13. Well, something you ought to know, the way we talk about property tax rates in Indiana, we talk about them in terms of dollars per $100 assessed value. So IPS's tax rate is $1.1336, or about $1.13 per $100 assessed value. If you want to think of that as 1.1%, that works too, but we always put dollar signs in front of the rates rather than percentage signs at the end of the rates. So the rate is $1.1336, and the median rate, that is the middle rate across the state, is 98 cents. So the IPS rate is a little bit higher than the median. The 75th percentile, and that means that 25% are above and 75% are below, the 75th percentile is $1.20. So IPS is in that second quarter there between the 50th and the 75th percentile. If the additional 23 cents gets added on, that would be $1.36 on the rate, and that would put IPS in the top quarter, but not in the top 10%. Here in Marion County, the highest school rate is $2.63 in Beech Grove, and the lowest rate is 80 cents in Washington Township. Now, the tax rate that taxpayers pay is, yes, the school rate, but also the city-county rate, and the library district rate, and the township rate, and a whole slew of special district rates as well. So these get stacked on top of one another. And so within IPS, the total rate that people pay to IPS and all of the other units of government in which their property is located is between $2.70 and $2.75. And this is actually a fairly modest rate for a city. The average district rate, the average tax rate paid by people who live in cities and towns across Indiana, and the cities and towns, the median population of a city or town in Indiana is about 1,000. So we're talking very small towns and very big cities, but the median rate is $2.66, and as I said, it's about $2.75 at highest here in Marion County where IPS is located. The highest rate in Marion County is $5.22 in Beech Grove, and that will be one of the highest rates in the entire state, and the lowest rate is $2.37 in Washington Township. So IPS sort of moderately high as far as its rate, and the rate for taxpayers in the IPS area very close to the median.
And when we were sitting here listening to Weston explain the challenges the district has faced, just in terms of state revenue shrinking, federal revenue shrinking, all the TIF districts, is this unique to IPS, or is this a problem that other districts are facing?
Well, okay, so state aid was basically frozen for about 5 years during and after the Great Recession, as the state budget lost a good deal of sales tax and income tax revenue. We have cut taxes since then, and so we have not actually recovered the trend to where we were back in 2009. As a share of Indiana, the Indiana economy, or total Indiana income, our state government is smaller today than it was 10 years ago. And so that affects school corporations all over the place. We've also moved our state formula so that the money, as is said, follows the student. And while this might sound like the logical thing, how else would you do it? It means now that places that have stable or declining enrollment see less revenue, and those that have growing enrollment see more revenue. And Weston, I'm guessing you're at best stable and perhaps declining a little bit. And so that's a disadvantage under our system for IPS. The other thing that's happened is we have decreased what I call the tilt. The formula is set up so that school corporations that have low-income students, either those who get free textbooks or those who are on the school lunch program, get more revenue per pupil than those who have fewer low-income students. And the difference between those two has narrowed in the last several years, and that would have worked against IPS as well.
Great, thank you very much. So Rosa, the referendum seems to be directed at you as a teacher. You know, they want to make the school safer for you. They want to pay you more money. They want you to stay here in the district. Could you just explain to everyone, what it's like working in an IPS school, being in the trenches? What are the challenges you face? What are the successes you have? But what do you think the district can do to improve your ability to teach students?
First of all, let me say thank you to allowing us an opportunity to have a teacher voice here present today. And I appreciate how the Chamber's working with IPS and figuring out how to spend our money best. But as you may mention, neither the Chamber nor administration knows exactly what our kids need on a daily basis. It's us who are in the trenches with the kids. And we are affected simply by the fact that there are a lot of us, and I see some of my teacher friends out in the audience, that are dedicated to our kids every day. And we cannot sit there and say we are at a higher pay and competitive with other township schools around us. And it makes it hard for us. It wears us down, because after we're done doing it and smiling all day with our children, we then have to go work a second job. to make ends meet within our own household. And that's troubling. We deserve to be competitive and keep and maintain our health benefits while we give to our students that we service daily a learning environment that they feel safe, that we can build a relationship of trust. And without this referendum, what we're facing right now, the turnover rate of teachers is really impacting the learning. I'm happy to see we went up 84% of graduation, but I know, and I know my teachers out there, we want more. You know, we expect the best. Our students are important, and they do matter. They do deserve a chance, and being an inner city should not be a downfall for them. Our community needs to embrace us, our students, so we can make them successful to give back to our community.
Since the district has gone through such a long period of a pay freeze that only changed in the past 2 years, if the referendum passes, do you think that will be enough to convince teachers and staff to stay, to be able to try and retain them, since there is the outlook of a pay increase for years to come?
I hope. But for that to happen, like we were having conversation prior to this start, what does that look like? We've talked about a 10% raise, but more would be wonderful.
Thank you. Thanks. So as this referendum has kind of rolled out in the past year or so, the Indy Chamber has become a major part of this discussion. And you could say there's been an intense set of negotiations between the Chamber and the district over the amount they requested. The Chamber basically saying, please come to our side of the amount and we will support you. If not, we may not support you. So Mark, I guess, could you just explain why the Chamber wants to have such an interest and a buy-in in this process?
Well, first of all, as an IPS parent, I want to thank the teachers, the board, and the administrators for everything they do. They provide a high-quality education, and we want to see IPS succeed, and that's very much how we at the Chamber started the process. Was we know as a city we will not succeed if IPS does not succeed. Our involvement with IPS did not start this year or early last year or late last year. But we've been engaged with the IPS for many years, and in 2013 we had an all-volunteer-led operational analysis. It was great to see our CEO at the time come in right around the same time that Dr. Farabee came in, embraced the operational assessment we did at that point, but we knew that that wasn't enough. And so when IPS came out with the original number, we met with them several times. We tried to get to a position of support, but staff does not make policy the Chamber, that is led by our policy councils and our board, and there were concerns. And the more we started digging into it, there were concerns about the viability of the referendum, whether it would actually pass. And we did not want to see the referendum fail. So we worked with the board and the administration to come up with a plan to delay the referendum until November, and in that time do a very, very intensive operational analysis. We brought some of the best change consultants in the nation. We took that cost on. They came in, did a very aggressive analysis, and we released our report last week with the finalization of the MOU, how we're going to go forward. But we very much, kind of had three points. We want to see IPS become the best urban school district in the nation that prepares our kids for the 21st century economy and workforce through differentiated learning environments. 2, we want IPS to become a magnet for the best teachers and administrators, and we have great teachers, but we want to make sure to retain them and reduce that turnover rate. And 3, we need to set IPS on a sustainable fiscal path. We can't continue to have these managed by crisis. So we want to set IPS on a sustainable operational and financial path that allows us to keep these decisions and all of these decisions made at the local level. So we're not faced with the state takeover our school district, but these decisions are made at the local level. And so that was how we started the process. I got to say, our consultants advise communities, school districts all over the nation, and they said they've never experienced a more open and transparent administration. They have dug deep and worked in partnership with the administration and the board to develop our report.
Thanks. And to follow up on that for you, Mike, so I think you probably have heard this yourself, I've heard this, you know, you are an elected board, you're the president of the elected IPS school board. Why would you let the chamber kind of start these negotiations? Why would you let them have such a voice or a pull in this discussion when the board had previously decided on a higher request for taxes?
I guess I don't know that I would address it as let. I think the board said, come in and help us. And I think there's a couple layers to that answer. And I am a victim of my own experience. So I've lived in this community when the times Dr. DeBoer talked about when we went through a property tax crisis, and it's the level of involvement needed in examining both how much money we absolutely needed and how much money this community could absorb, right? I go places, I sit down in meetings, and I hear people talk about sort of I may be at my absolute limit on what I can pay in taxes, but I'm committed to a strong public school system in this community. And so, one, we had to find that right place. And then two, as you probably gathered from Weston's presentation, the level of difficulty, the level of complexity of school financing in the state of Indiana and replacing property tax funds with general fund revenue from the state that's made up of sales tax and income tax dollars. It's very complicated, and I'll be the first to admit it took me the work that we did with the chamber to really dig deep enough and really get a better understanding. And then, I go back to my experience of having lived in this community for a long time, had various positions in this community. And it isn't just sort of their work that they did with us to find the right number, but in this community, when we've accomplished big things, we've done them together. And one of the things Mark referenced, I think was important, that it's important that we get broad community support, not just the chamber, right? We've worked with other organizations, and as we work at finding the right financial implementation model, we're working with the Council of Great City Schools to make sure we're doing things appropriately from an education structure perspective. But it's also important that we kept the community together, that we didn't present a referendum where there would be a lot of opposition. I would happen to have the opportunity to be with former Mayor Peterson this morning at an event, and we talked about sort of where the chamber was with the school system when he entered office in 2000, and talked about how dramatically different, how much more productive the relationship between the chamber and other business organizations and the school system are, and we're the only school system that has the name of our city. And so keeping that relationship and keeping the community, the broad community, involved in the success of this school system was vitally important to us as a board.
Okay, thank you. When the referendum was approved for the May ballot, I think the operating request was $725 million, and there was a lot of different types of programming kind of put on that it would maybe help fund special education in other areas. Now that's down to $220 million, all going towards teacher pay. What is being cut? Are there services that will not be funded or receive less funding?
So
for Weston, sure.
In the July 24th board presentation, there is a slide. It's called Cash Flow Assumptions. And I will reference this, but I also will use it to describe the changes. Okay? So July 24th board presentation. It lays out 4 different columns for the 4 different asks. We'll just go from the first one to the last one. So $736 million and $220 million is the operating. $200 million was the original capital. 52 is the current one. So preface that with, as we were putting together the cash flow projection, I had to look back and go, you know what, August of 2014, I was a volunteer, I was part of a budget development committee, and I had been given some data by the finance team of IPS to figure out, should we spend our cash reserve? Should we spend our rainy day fund? And again, I was a volunteer, looked at the data, spent about 3 hours at home, and came with the conclusion, wow, the revenue projection that IPS has from the state and the expenditure levels that they have, if they continue that, they're going to run out of money in 2019. And I told that to the board in August of 2014. It's on the web, it's in the board docs, check it out. I joined IPS in July 2015, and the first thing I did was I hired a financial advisor. We've been working with UMBA from the get-go, not to show we need a referendum, but to show what's the long-term projection. You know, what's the 3 to 5 year projection? That's how you manage a business. That's how you manage an organization. And so what had been worked on for about 2 years prior to that time frame in December was an understanding that, wow, we've been on an economic expansion for 7, 8, 9 years, unprecedented. The downtown boom is happening, and the assessed values are going up. When is there going to be a downtick? When is there going to be a recession? So at some point, there's going to happen, and we have been averaging about 1.5%. So we've been experiencing 1.5%, and we know something's going to come down the way here with our real estate. I'm going to be conservative for the community and say, you know what? If we've been in an economic expansion and IPS has been experiencing 1.5%, if a recession happens, what does that mean? So 0% to me was reasonable. We presented that. That's factored into the $736 million and $200 million ask. The assessed value assumption now is 2.6%. Okay, so back in July, back in June, back in March, working with the team, you know, we're being asked to assume a 2.6% annual growth on the AV that we haven't experienced as a community the last few years. Okay. Well, the great thing is, and this is great, the first year out of the gate, after we approved the July 24th, at the same week, Department of Local Government Finance came out and certified our assessed value at 6%. That's great. That means the wealth of the Indianapolis district is good. I'm glad that it's happening on the early end of this ask than at the end and having a really big downturn early. So again, the difference on the assessed value, the original December was 0%, now it's 2.6. I think it's going to be a positive thing going forward. The property tax levy and circuit breaker estimates, we didn't know what we know now because of the 8, 9, 10-month difference. But that's been a positive thing for IPS. But we know more about that versus the 736 and 220. The state tuition support, again, I highlighted, in December, we assumed a 0% per pupil student dollar coming into IPS. We're now assuming 1%. Again, the last 8 years, IPS is receiving 4.8% less than what it was in 2010. And we're going to assume 1% going forward. So what we've done is we've put two things. The economy has to keep going in an unprecedented way. And at the same time, the state tax, the legislation, coming out in the next legislative session, which we have to go through 4 biennium budgets, has to average 1%. And we haven't experienced that in the past. But we're going to assume that because Legislative Services Agency and legislators and other experts have said 1% is reasonable. Cash balance target in December was 15%. It's 2 months of reserves. We have a cash management policy, 1 month to 3 months. It was right in the middle. 2 months of reserves, that's what a lot of government agencies are asked to do and to monitor. In our ask in July, we've lowered it down to 1 month at 8%. So in all 3 instances, it's a revenue and a cash balance perspective, not even talking about change in expenditures. So we're putting more trust and more need for the economy to continue as it is. We need the legislature to come up with the 1% that we haven't experienced. And we're going to need to be very, very tight with our cash, more so than ever before. On the expenditure side, the December investment in teachers was over $200 million. The investment in July is over $200 million. How do we make that work? Revenue assumptions, less conservative, and the projected savings that come from strategic shifts in transportation, facilities, and our general operations as a school.
So I'm going to try and summarize. Okay, sure, yeah.
So if you think about 724 and 220, so 220 is new money, the agreement on new money into the program from 724, and some of that's built on the financial assumptions you heard Weston talk about. But then there is, and one of the reasons why we entered into an MOU with the Chamber, there are identified savings, many of which we brought to the Chamber to, there's one of two ways in which those numbers meet. One, you generate new revenue, and the other is you generate savings. And so I think there is an estimation of about $400 million in additional savings over the course of that 8-year period, if I remember my numbers correctly. And so, it's not just we're accepting $220 million and that's the final number. There is work to be done in between to bring those numbers closer by cost savings. The other, lost my train of thought on the component of that. The other component of that is Weston talks about with the increase in assessed valuation. That doesn't raise the number as the assessed valuation of the IPS district increases. It does not raise the amount of money that we're generating. We're capped at $220 million. It means the impact on taxpayers will be less.
So just to summarize, so I think people understand, the question was, there's a difference in the original ask and the ask now. Would something program is being cut? Sounds like you're saying due to planned savings and efficiencies and changes in the economy, hopefully a good economy and assessed values, you're not foreseeing that happening because it's going to basically even out in the long run. Would that be
if you take a good look at our financial reports and our budget, and you get comfortable with all the reports that's on our financial website, myips.org, go to Central Services, go to Finance, you'll find everything I think that you'll need to know to get a great snapshot of where we've been and where we are today. We have a budget that's funding the strategic plan of 2015 that the community and the business community asked for, and we're doing it. We've done it on our own. We've depleted our cash reserve, and we need to keep it going. So if you get invested in understanding what our current budget is, and at the level that we're funding schools, we want to continue that.
And I don't want to leave anybody with the impression that there aren't hard decisions to be made.
Exactly.
We talked about transportation, and while I've got an audience, I'm going to get on my soapbox here. We have 10 public school transportation systems in this county, right? There's one that doesn't have, we have 11 school systems, one doesn't have a transportation system. We have 10 school bus transportation systems in one county. I'm not sitting here proposing a merger of school systems, but it is maybe the definition of insanity that we have with choice schools, that we have school buses going across county. There is some significant savings to be had if we implement a county-wide school bus transportation program, perhaps under the umbrella of Indigo. I'm not proposing anything other than that's an area where significant savings can be had. There are other decisions with regards to facilities that we're going to have to make, and they're going to be tough decisions, no doubt about it. But we're committed to making sure that the money generated goes to teacher salaries and providing the best education that our teachers are doing in that classroom. So making sure those dollars go to the classrooms.
Now, the plan that the Chamber has kind of put forward to help find these savings to help increase teacher pay vastly, it included going to Indigo for a majority of busing and closing some schools. I mean, are those decisions that you think the board and the district will have to make in the next year or two, just as it tries to figure out the best way of funding going forward and finding these different types of savings?
Well, what we've articulated is, and I think thus far, I've got two board members, see if they confirm it through the reports we're hearing back on the Indigo experiment within our high schools is very good. We don't see Indigo as a transportation option for all of our students. We do not see Indigo as a transportation model for all of our students. We have imbalances within the district. We have some schools that have lots of empty seats, and we have some schools in other parts of the community that don't have enough. There will be some striking of a balance with regards to balancing those facilities out. We will continue to work. I want to articulate, and maybe you said it differently than I heard it, but the continued work between us and the Chamber is an IPS-led effort. The people that the Chamber is, thankfully for us, providing are going to be hired by Dr. Farabee and will report to their outcomes will be reported to Dr. Farabee and the board. But we see ourselves doing this in a very transparent way, but there are difficult decisions to be made.
Okay, thanks. The Innovation Network School model has probably been one of the biggest changes to IPS, in many, many years in terms of turnaround schools, school reform, getting new partners into the district, acquiring high-performing schools as part of the district. How will those schools benefit from the referendum? I know there's different models. So Heron High School is a standalone charter school that's part of the district, but like Restart School, School 103, Elder Diggs. Can you talk about will those schools all receive funding for safety? Will they all receive funding for teacher pay? How does that work?
You want to take a stab at it first, and I'll fill in?
So I don't know how much the audience.
Well, I know it's a complex topic if people aren't familiar with the various levels of innovation schools. I mean, there's maybe four or five different types. So maybe you could explain, I guess, will all innovation schools receive funding from the referendum?
So innovation schools have agreements with the district to operate a school. Some of those innovation agreements with schools involve that school being in an IPS building. Some of those agreements involve schools that have their students transported to that school. Some of those schools have special education teachers. Some of those have Title I resources. Some of them have English as a second language resources. The ability for us to continue to provide those services and resources to the students in need, based on the needs outlined in those agreements, will be contingent upon this referendum. So what we'll be doing with the buildings, that's contingent upon the capital referendum. What's going to happen with the transportation? It's contingent upon the referendum. Most of the agreements, if not all, have words in there saying as applicable other schools, other students. And so as far as the innovation, non-innovation language, the impact is across the board. Referendum passes, referendum fails. Those main areas of facilities, transportation, and the supports that are provided through mainly teaching resources would be sustained.
In the other aspect of that, one of the things I'm proud of, and it was difficult and complicated, but the impact on equity across the district was very important, is our student-based allocation. And so to the extent that the referendum allows us to have a higher student-based allocation, and those students going to those schools will generate more money for those other schools too. One of the points when we were in discussion with the Chamber with regards to teacher pay was this sort of bifurcation, and one of the points of autonomy, one of the points of giving schools greater autonomy and away from us is they set the teacher pay. Mm-hmm. And so it wasn't like, we've been very clear with those schools, we don't set the teacher pay at those schools. The head of the school does that. Now, when we pay our IPS teachers more, we will drive that market, certainly.
Okay, that's what I want to go to next in terms of teacher pay. Feroza, I mean, I know teacher pay is, the district can't say we're going to pay someone this much money because there has to be a negotiation with the association, with the union. What do you and your fellow teachers, I guess, want to hear about teacher pay if the referendum passes?
I sit up here right now and I'm listening to their answers as a teacher. I am feeling some sort of way right now because as IPS, we are traditional public schools and we deserve, if not more, better than the innovation schools. Yes, they're IPS property. However, traditional public schools with this referendum should be priority. And that includes us as teachers. We lose those kids, they go, they're not happy, so then they come right back to us. And you've already mentioned the money follows the kid. Well, when that kid comes back, the money does not come back. And what we are facing within our schools, and I can speak more specifically being at a high school, you have already broken the neighborhood community by closing these high schools and putting them into Tech, Shortridge, George Washington, Crispus Attucks, and it is causing an emotional breakdown, and relationships are not being able to be met because of the teacher turnover and the movement of students. And we haven't had a moment, at least at Tech, to embrace our students tremendously yet, with scheduling changes, not allowing or having enough counselors to service our students with the impact of, I speak on a daily basis to my ESL students about what track you might want to be on with the 3 E's, employment, enlistment, enrollment. And it's difficult when we attempt to send a student to go have a conversation with a counselor, and the counselor is too busy, overwhelmed, not to say that they don't want to give their children time, but we need more. We need more counselors. Our teachers need smaller class sizes. And I know, because I hear from those innovation teachers, for example, we just received one who left and came back to IPS. They're sitting with smaller classes, but we are not, and that's a problem. It's not giving our learning environment the safe, secure, trustworthy area for our students to be more successful.
And I guess what I take from that, I think, you know, the past year, I think, has been major changes in the district. The closure of high schools, the consolidation of schools. I mean, would it be fair to say that, you know, this referendum is almost the glue you're hoping that can get you through these changes, especially if there are, you know, more transitions and consolidations?
I don't think anybody on the board had any preconceptions that closing high schools was going to be an easy decision. I think the reality of our world is closing high schools was the right decision to make sure we could then turn around and make the reinvestments back in the college and career academies to make sure that we're helping our teachers teach, and then coming back with a referendum that allows us, again, as I said, to put those dollars directly into the teachers and into the classroom. It isn't, listen, no one underestimates the complexities and the challenges that our students face. And if they do, they haven't spent any time in our schools. So I appreciate very much the work that you do. We are living in a world of restricted dollars coming into any political subdivision because of tax caps and because of the way budgets are being made. We want to make sure that, again, as I said, the community supports the school system, but the school system also supports the community. And you know, we can have the debate about whether we're on the right path with autonomous schools and innovation schools. It's something I remain committed to, and I think as we unbundle some of the lessons learned from the last round of testing, we'll find that those schools are performing better, but that doesn't mean we don't have any less a commitment to the schools that we have within our entire portfolio, and we'll continue to make those investments at the teacher level and at the classroom level.
Okay. Just want to remind everyone again, if you want to ask a question, I think we're going to be ending that soon. You can raise your hand and get a card, or on social media, you can write it as hashtag IPS Tax Forum. So Mark, I just want to follow up that topic with you as well. I mean, for the chamber, I mean, how vital is it to have the city district, you know, being a great school district? I mean, when you're talking to businesses or people that want to move into the city to set up shop, I mean, how much are they focused on being able to live in the city versus living 40 minutes away in a suburb?
That is the most important investment we can make. People make residential decisions based off of perceptions of the school system and crime. We have the statistics that show we've got a great momentum in attracting millennials, younger people, into our community, but as soon as they hit school age, families of school age children, they go to the suburbs. When we have now not just property tax caps, but a shift to income tax to fund local services. Income tax is paid where you live, regardless of where you generate that income. We have very high income producing jobs in our community being filled by people that do not live in the community. That's not bad. We are a regional economy and a regional workforce, but we need to make sure that Indianapolis remains a viable option for people to invest. That we can't just hem poverty in and concentrate poverty into certain parts of our city and expect the entire region to succeed. So, of course, the school districts are critical to the success. I think, as Mike mentioned, this is the only school district that has the Indianapolis brand in its name. And so there's a lot of confusion when we have Unigov, but, you know, combined city-county government, but 11 different school districts. So it's very important that IPS is successful. The fact that 25% of the property isn't taxable. And then you look at the majority of that tax that is paid by businesses because of the divestment we've seen in our neighborhoods. So yes, we have to have a strong, successful IPS for our cities to succeed.
It seems like one of the issues that no one really is questioning, maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like the need for safety, you know, it's secure buildings. I think I've seen up in Noblesville, after the unfortunate shooting up there, they have a referendum that is looking to pay for, additional security staff, counselors. Professor DeBoer, I mean, can you answer this in terms of safety needs? Is this something that we're going to see that the schools asking their communities to pay for because there isn't enough funding from the state level to kind of make these additions that people hadn't thought about 15 or 30 years ago?
It would just be anecdotal evidence that I see. Well, the school buildings we've got were mostly built years ago. In my own community, I know, the elementary schools and the high school, it's wide open. People can walk right in. The trend now, I think, is to create a kind of holding tank for people who come in, check in the window, and buzz them in, and that's expensive. And every time we have an event, like in Noblesville, I think it alerts people to the need for safety, and it's the world that we live in. So I'm sure that is one of the selling points and one of the reasons why capital projects referenda are coming forward.
Mm-hmm. I think Weston, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the average age of an IPS building is 56 years old.
1956. It was built in 1955. That's the average. So do the math.
And as Dr. DeBoer said, they're older buildings. They are, by their definition, owning a 100 and some odd year old house. They're more expensive to maintain, and whenever we turn one pipe, we don't know what pipe is going to break. And then creating a safe perimeter, and our kids deserve to be safe as any kids in any place else. So the vast majority of our capital investment is in safety, and it is more expensive to do in our schools because of the age of our schools. And
could you just provide a few, explicit explanation of what would be put into the schools? I know some schools had different kinds of ID checks. What would be retrofitted at some of these buildings?
Yes, I wish our ops team could come and give you all the details, but the deck in June at the board meeting when we presented it had 4 different categories. They were, let's see, fire prevention response. So a lot of the fire systems, they're at code, but they're at the code of when they were installed. Okay, so if those items or equipment needs fixed, there aren't any more parts. That's how Scott, our ops guy, has explained it. So at some point, fire prevention is important. External safety measures. The last number of years, we've been investing in secure vestibules. So if you go into many of our buildings, you will go into one door, and as Dr. DeBoer is mentioning, you'll go into the office. You're not able to go into that second door until you go into the office and sign in. Our desire is to finish that project and finalize that for external safety measures. The internal safety measures that we would have a lot about locking, the classroom locking devices. More can be found on the deck on that. Then just emergency communication. Recently, we just had a test with a communication system. We're wanting to revamp the communication system. that we would have if anything would happen. How do we communicate across, again, 88 schools and programs, 80 square miles, and 4,400 staff? What are the levels of communication that we need to have? Then also the deferred maintenance. A lot of the times, you think about deferred maintenance not as safety, but if you have parking lots and you have roofs and you have tuck points on the brick of a building, those end up being safety as well.
Okay, thanks. And I know this has been discussed previously, but I just want to make sure those watching or in the audience understand fully in terms of the request for the money for teacher pay. What can you say to teachers in terms of what they will receive? I know, like I said, I know that's all based on negotiations, but I mean,
as a board member,
as a board, I mean, what would you want the teachers to
as a board member, I don't participate in the collective bargaining process,
right.
but I think I can speak collectively for the board. We entered this discussion with the chamber over the course of the summer with the desire to make sure our teachers were among the highest paid in the state of Indiana, and that is, I think, the continued desire. Whether the revenue that comes in through this referendum will get us to that point. We hope it gets us significantly to that point.
Okay. Hearing that, Rosa, what do we think about that?
I believe it when I see it.
Thank you. Thanks. I mean, do you feel that the district has a ways to go in kind of making their staff feel that this is in the future?
Well, I think it's I wasn't in the room, and I don't second guess anybody's decisions because of the financial challenges we were facing at the time as a school system. I think freezing teacher salary for 5 years and then trying to get back to a competitive process through a normal annual small percentage, while also trying to make sure we're keeping healthcare costs minimal impact on the employees. I think that it makes it tough to catch up, and we, in addition to making sure we're providing competitive teacher pay and the best education possible to our students, we also have to be good stewards of our tax dollars. And so all that comes together with making the best decision as a school system. But yeah, I think you'll see, and I'm not going to speak for Dr. Farabee in this. He's the one who ultimately has to bring it to the board. But I think you'll see us make great strides towards competitive teacher pay.
Okay, great. So right now we have about 20 minutes left, a little bit more. I got a stack of questions, and I'm hoping to get through all of these. So I'm guessing maybe if everyone can provide a short answer, we can try and do this. Everyone who is here tonight.
Professor.
Lightning round, yes. Everyone who's here tonight. And I guess we'll start off with an easy one. Is there a document that shows what improvements will be made at each school? And will Crispus Attucks get a new athletic field if this is passed?
So the new athletic field at Attucks, that is not in the ask. And then I believe on our vote yes for IPS or link to the myips.org/learn more, the list will be posted very, very soon. I was checking it today. I think we had one for the initial ask. We are continuing to work on that, and that's the ops team working on that to give that list.
Because some of it includes roof replacements in some schools, right? And
yeah, about 11, what was that, 11%? 11 million or so was related to roof replacements.
Okay. Right, I understand the competitive rates, the new money would be used to pay teachers more for retention, but I'm concerned about technology resources. Will any of this funding go toward improving technology at the schools?
We just recently did a general obligation bond on technology resources, and obviously part of the capital referendum will be technology. And I think that's sort of overall as we, again, I'm differentiating between, there's $220 million in new revenues proposed by the referendum, and then there's the continued work that we're doing with the Chamber and with the Great City Schools to look for savings. A lot of that reinvestment of money in things like technology are going to come from us, whether it's shrinking our transportation costs or others, to make sure that we're able to put resources back into classroom technology. Again, same thing. Our students deserve to have the same technology that students have at schools all across the state.
Okay. Professor DeBoer, maybe one for you. Will non-property owners foot the bill if this referendum is passed?
Will non-property owners foot the bill? Well, they won't receive the bill. That's true. Oh, this is an opportunity to do some real economics here, and I will restrain myself. But do you think that tax increases on rental housing increase the rents paid by tenants? If you think so, then yes, tenants end up paying some of the bill.
All right.
Can I just add, because I think there's an interesting thing that I didn't understand about the referendum until we got engaged in this. And so in addition to 25% of our district being non-taxed, and that being either tax-exempt properties or non-tax properties, we have the largest percentage of tax increment financing districts in our district than any other school district in Marion County. I can't speak to other school districts. And if you understand how TIF districts work, essentially property taxes generated by a piece of property pre-improvements are frozen. And those, tell me if I'm describing this wrong, Dr. Or you do have a PhD after your name, I do not. But they're frozen at that level, and the increment of property taxes generated by the improvements go back into either the infrastructure in that area, or they go back into a TIF fund to be kept within that, whatever that TIF district is. And that has had significant impact as as Weston talked about, the downtown assessed valuation has increased because much of that has happened in TIF districts. The one, I think, part that the legislature got right with regards to this round of legislating how referendums work is the additional taxes on assessed valuation apply across all TIFs and come to the taxing districts, which is a much more equitable way than spreading it on fewer and fewer property taxpayers.
The city administration is passing more of those dollars to the school districts. But you know, you think about a homeowner, they're paying, what, 60% of their true assessed value because of all the different deductions that they're able to take. So businesses don't get those homestead breaks. Rentals do not get those homestead breaks. So homeowners actually have a reduced tax liability just based on home ownership. So the rentals and the businesses are going to be hit a little bit at a higher, I mean, the rate is the same, but the AV is not decreased through all of those deductions.
If you do the arithmetic, you can see that a house with a gross assessed value or a market value of about $100,000, only a third of that is actually taxable. And that's how we deliver tax relief to homeowners in Indiana now. We simply don't tax a very large part of the value of the home.
And to follow up on that, someone else asked, when you're talking about people paying for the referendum, the tax increase, are you talking about businesses which own property in the IPS district in addition to homeowners? So Lilly or companies or the Colts,
yes,
are they the
they're
people
hit
paying?
much higher than homeowners. Same with rental properties. That is why the business community has a very vested interest, not just in the success of the district, but because businesses are paying such a large portion, and they don't always get a vote.
Yeah, so there's two layers to that. There are tax caps, 1%, 2%, and 3% tax caps. 2% is 1% is individuals, 2% is farms, 3% are businesses. Am I remembering that
Yes.
correctly? And then the business and rental properties do not get the homestead tax credit that the property owners get.
Okay. I think this would be for Weston. Can you be specific on any areas that IPS is in debt on? I mean, debt may be.
We have about $600 million in debt.
Okay.
We have a debt service fund. It goes back to 2008. We had investments in HVAC at that point. If you look at any of the quarterly finance updates or the reports on our site, you'll see that the district has debt.
Okay. All districts have debt. But it would be a pitch. Anybody interested in school finances should. I see Kelly Bentley's here. We love to get together as the finance committee, and we meet for about an hour and a half every quarter, and everyone's welcome to come. Gripping meetings.
And so the debt sometimes is you buy a bond to improve buildings. I think air conditioning was a thing that was done in previous years. That's kind of where some of that debt comes from.
Yes.
Is that correct? So.
It might be worth saying that that's what a capital projects referendum is.
Right.
You're going to borrow the money and then pay it back over several years with the tax rate that's approved by the referendum.
I think the capital projects fund, Dr. DeBoer can maybe do the history of the capital projects fund, but the name itself makes you think that, oh, I am doing a ton of capital improvements. And in reality, the Capital Projects Fund is keeping the lights on. It's $10.7 million of utilities a year, which then ekes into the general fund. It supports our IT network base. So we want equitable support of our schools with IT. Well, you've got to have a group that supports that. The Capital Projects Fund supports the network of the system. The break fix, repair, the repairmen, just keeping the lights on is what the Capital Projects Fund really is. The name is not right. So in 1920, there's going to be a transition of the funds.
You mean 2020?
2020.
Yeah, we're in the 20.
So
We're in the 20.
So July 1, 2019, so for school year 1920, we will be having a shift from Capital Projects Fund, Transportation bus replacement. And when property tax dollars come into those funds, they're restricted, okay? So money coming into capital projects, you can't fund school teaching, okay? Transportation comes in, it's used for yellow bus and transportation, okay? What happens in 1920 is something that provides flexibility to districts, not just IPS, but across the state. And so education operations fund are the new titles of the fund. So education basically being these are where teachers, assistants, the special supports that go to teach and deliver the educational experience are in the education fund. The state dollars that come in from the state, they will come into the education fund, and then the operations fund will be basically a consolidation of the previous capital projects, transportation and transportation bus replacement funds that are property tax funded. So that's a big shift that's happening, and what it will allow us to do is that one rate versus 3 rates will be coming into operations, and if a school district that's not IPS or IPS wants to do more of a shift towards transportation with funds that previously may have been tabbed capital projects, they can do that. They can invest in their transportation. Likewise, if they don't need transportation, or they want to reduce the transportation and put the dollars over into education, they can do that. And I think that's something that's a big shift. 40 years or so, historically, this is the first shift in school finance in like 40 years. It's huge. And I think it's a great thing for the schools to have that flexibility, and we hope to capitalize on that as much as possible. Again, the key is maximizing our resources, but we have to make sure when we invest in transportation, we hit the mark, but we do it with the least cost. And that's where I think engaged with any chamber to advocate with Indigo and get that reduction of transportation service costs, which then can be thrown into the educational pot for teachers and schools. That's what it's all about. Same thing with facilities. We can right-size our facilities and keep our pedal down on that. Maximize, utilize those resources, be energy efficient. Less dollars in that operations fund allows us to put more dollars in the educational experience. All at the same time, we're hoping AV continues to go up. We hope the tax rate is reasonable, viable for the community. And those dollars come in, again, with the new flexibility that they never have had before. It's a new day for Indiana school districts.
And this kind of fits in with what you just were discussing, Weston. And this is a question I get a lot too. What is the rationale for the decline in federal and state revenue to IPS? Who would like to maybe briefly explain why we are seeing a reduction outside of enrollment fluctuations? Or is enrollment fluctuations the main reason?
So enrollment for IPS has been between 31 and 32 for the last 5-6 years. So over the course of the 4-decade look at what the IPS graph would look like, 100,000 in 1960, yeah, it's decreased. But in the near term here, it's been pretty stable. And again, you're talking about funding for an entire school year based on one day. Okay? So at some point, our enrollment is stable. So why the decrease in funding at the state level? Because the dollar per pupil has decreased. Again, $7,300 some dollars in 2010, $7,014 this year. That's a decrease in dollar per pupil with the enrollment staying the same. That's it. Now, why is it decreased? I think that's where you get to public policy and what's happening at the State House and where urbans and suburbans and the rurals are maybe at odds with each other. But at the same time, the shift has been, so for in 2015-16, I started in July 2015, I inherited a budget that was set before the legislative session of 15 was ended. Okay, so the budget had to be approved April 1st. The legislative session ended April 15. The budget during 2015 for the 15-16 school year was set at the dollar per pupil that was received in 2014-15. We received less, about $360 less in 15-16 my first year. So I inherited a budget that was set at the 2014-15 rate. The legislative session changed the funding formula basically to move free and reduced lunch percentage multiplied by a dollar amount. They didn't change the dollar amount, they lowered the percentage. IPS was hit among a lot of other urban districts, high poverty, direct certification with TANF, Medicaid, foster care, hitting a lot of need in the district. That was the metric. And so when you look at the why, it's because the funding formula in 2015 shifted and impacted urban districts like IPS more than other people in the state.
And I add a little context to that, I guess. As the legislature makes school funding formula decisions, in that period, they made a significant shift. Actually, the urban and the rural school systems were negatively impacted, and the suburban school systems were positively impacted. And that's a policy decision, and that's the answer to both the questions. Why is there less federal money coming? Why is there less state money? It is, we can agree or disagree, but they are policy decisions made at the state legislative level. And you can, if you look at sort of where leadership comes from in the caucuses that are controlling the legislature, then you can begin to understand where those policy decisions are coming from and why.
Okay. Here's a question that kind of goes back to the topic of innovation schools. And basically, this person says at their school, there is the rumor or the concern that if the referendum passes, most of the pay raise will go to teachers at innovation schools. I know we've already kind of addressed how the pay works, but could you address this question as well?
Yeah, interestingly, I answered a question on the opposite side this morning, I believe, about sort of their understanding was that none of the pay raise was going to go to the teachers in Innovation Network schools. We don't set the pay for Innovation Network teachers. Our focus is obviously, and you've heard Dr. Farabee talk about this, focus on our teachers with regards to this. Will there be some benefit for our schools, our IPS schools that are in our portfolio? Yes, but we're focused on the teachers where, through the collective bargaining agreement, we set the pay for.
And then those teachers who are not in the collective bargaining agreement, it would be up to those school leaders on their own to decide or feel pressure because fellow IPS teachers within the district are being paid more.
If you want to break down to the economics, obviously we're going to help set that market. But that's part of the whole autonomy decision, is autonomy is autonomy.
And here's a question, quick question, but I can help answer this one as well. Do you have a parent on the panel tonight? Well, I'm a parent. IPS parent is the question. Weston and Marks, I guess. I'll ask this question. Do you think this is going to pass? What's your thoughts on the passage of this?
Well, I wouldn't have spent an enormous amount of my time over the summer on lots of conference calls and lots of meetings. Yes, I think a couple things. One, I will remind you that we were at 340 and IPS was at 340 and the Chamber was at 100 million. And we spent a lot of time sort of saying, okay, how do we come to the middle? The middle wasn't a magic number, but how do we come to a number that we think can meet our needs with some stretching and if we continue to work to look for savings? I think there is no, to my knowledge, organized opposition. I think we still have our work to do. Anytime you're asking people to voluntarily increase their own taxes, and in today's political climate, it's a very difficult thing. Do I feel good about where we are today? Yes. Do I think we have our work to do? Yes.
Okay.
We're going down the line.
Okay. And now just to nail this question home again, but I will ask it. Does IPS guarantee there will be a teacher raises if it passes? If so, I will support the referendum, this person writes.
I guess I don't know how many times I can answer the question other than say yes.
Okay, all right. Well, I want to thank all of you for coming tonight. I know it's sometimes hard with, this many people up on stage to kind of have a nice dialogue and let everybody speak. So we have a few minutes. Briefly, I just want to give each of you like 30 seconds to say anything you'd like to say if you want to make a closing statement. Possibly, Professor, you could maybe start this off. I mean, are we looking at this is already the new normal, right? I mean, we're not going to see school districts stop requesting tax referendum.
Well, in this part of the state, it's the new normal. Across the state, 60% of school corporations have never tried a referendum. But here in Marion County and the Donut, very common, very common. And the passage rates have been increasing over the last 10 years. Back in May, 12 out of 12 passed. It's been a rule of thumb that once you pass one, you almost certainly pass every time you try after that. So I think you'd have to conclude that the improving economy is probably helping, that the improving expertise on the part of school corporations in running campaigns is almost certainly having an impact, and perhaps the public is coming to accept that this is part of, as you say, the normal way we fund schools.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rosa Vasquez, anything you'd like to say?
I just want to say thank you for allowing teachers to have a voice in this forum today, and I hope all the teachers that are here spread the word. If you are a teacher that lives in the district, say yes. If you have families, tell them every day you can, yes. And just make sure, Mr. O'Connor, that us teachers are taken care of and you put traditional public schools first in your decision making.
Mark Fisher with Indy Chamber, any parting words?
Yeah, we are fully supportive of the referendum. I would ask residents and voters in the IPS district to vote yes, but be educated about it too. I guess I shouldn't be surprised being in the profession that I'm in, working in a lot of public policy, but there is a lot of misinformation out there. Mm-hmm. There's a big lack of understanding what is actually in IPS's control versus what is in the control of the legislature. That's right. And so I just educate yourself not just on how this single referendum will impact you, your school district, your children, but get engaged at all levels and understand where those decisions are made, because they're not always in the control of the school district.
Right. Weston Young?
3 years ago, I had a chance to become the Chief Financial Manager at IPS, and one of the first times I had a chance to really dive deep into the complexity of state school finance was going to a presentation by Dr. Larry DeBurr. And I've incorporated a lot of his thought, his learnings, his ideas, his forecasts into some of the reports that we've generated. If you go to the IPS Finance Report website, you'll see the quarterly finance update. The appendix is chock full of information that you can hopefully look for yourselves and say, hey, I'm going to go Google this, and is this the indicator that is right? It's all there. I encourage you to check it out. myips.org, finance page, you'll have information on the financial reports, what we have to actually do to be compliant, to receive those funds, and also what we've done strategically and proactively to inform our audiences. I also has a link to provide you more information on student-based allocation, which was referenced by Commissioner O'Connor. I've kept this on the screen because get involved. Vote yes, please. But at the same time, call a school, go talk to a principal, see what you can do. Get involved. Read to a kid. It's an amazing opportunity to be in a school once a month to read to the 4th grade class at Lou Wallace. It's an absolute blast. It's what I look forward to, and I encourage you to get involved in that way too.
President O'Connor?
When I talk about the referendum in groups, I ask people to first think about what they had for breakfast this morning. Because I don't know about you, but I can't remember what I had for breakfast this morning. Then I ask people, tell me an educator that changed your life. And I can tell you 4: Dave Hines, Mary Peridot, Sister Ellen Therese Conway, and Nancy Herndon. 4 educators, like I said, I can't remember what I had for breakfast. 4 educators throughout my career as a student.
That's it.
This is what this is about. Those are 4 people who made change my life. You all who are teachers are people who are changing lives every day. And that's what this referendum is about, is making sure that we continue to change people's lives. That's what's on the ballot in November, and that's what I urge people to go out and support.
All right. Again, thank you all for coming tonight, speaking honestly and openly about this process. I want to thank everyone who came here as well and watched online. If you enjoyed this, we will have another event here November 16th. It will be October 16th. It will be a forum with all of the IPS school board candidates who are on the ballot. You can come here. You can hear what all of them have to say. That event, like this one, was brought to you by WFYI, Chalkbeat Indiana, the Recorder, and Central Library. Again, thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you.